All right, and we are recording. So, Ruslan KD, thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me, Jake.
It's really a pleasure and an honor to be able to speak to you. So, Ruslan, the way we got connected originally was I had this online discussion debate with Jonathan Pageau about religion, and you saw that episode and did a review of it, and then I saw your review and I reached out to you, and here we are. Um, so how did you find that discussion in the first place?
Man, the mighty YouTube algorithm just served it up to me. I
Yeah.
saw it just randomly and I was like, "Oh, this is interesting." And then you titled it well. I think you titled it like Heated Debate or something
Yeah.
like that. So it had a good title and I was like, "Oh, I've never seen Jonathan in this environment." And I know Jonathan personally
Mm.
and I've had him on my channel and got to hang out with him. He's a great guy. And so I know he doesn't like to debate, like that's
Mhm.
not his thing. But whenever he's in these environments, he actually does really well. So it's like, oh, okay, let me see that. I've never seen him in an environment like this. Let me check this out. And then I clicked into it and I was like, oh wow, this is really cool. Really good conversation.
Oh, awesome. And there's things I could have done differently or done better for sure. I and the truth is of how that conversation started and evolved was, I have this new podcast. I'm reaching out to people. The intention of my podcast is to talk to fascinating people like yourself and try to get deep and talk about and in some cases get into debates. And that's also part of what I'm trying to do is engage people in the tougher conversations. I'm talking to people with political views I might not understand or disagree with, and so point of the show is to just get in as deep as I can with people. But I also knew that about Jonathan. What you said is that he's not someone to debate because I had saw something briefly with him and Alex O'Connor, and I didn't watch the whole thing, so I might have this totally wrong. But my impression was that my impression, you could tell me if I'm wrong, was that Jonathan Pageau did not really want to debate Alex O'Connor, or Alex O'Connor knew this because that's not his thing. And so I kind of had an awareness of this going in. Um, and so at the beginning of the call, I do an intro about him, and then my first question originally was, let's talk about symbolism, and then right after that, I kind of impulsively was like, can I ask you about your religious views and your Christianity? And he said yes. He said yeah, and I said, can I press you on it? And he said sure. So that's how we
Right,
then
right, right.
got into it. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was a good conversation. I enjoyed your conversation with Jay Dyer as well. I think that was really cool and that was interesting. I think Jay Dyer is kind of more equipped to have those sorts of debates. Not equipped. Jonathan's very well equipped, but he that's his wheelhouse. Like Jay Dyer debates people on stream and he's very good at it. So I also enjoyed that conversation as well.
yeah, well, I'm glad you've. Uh, I'm glad you. I appreciate you checking out these conversations. So and you know, Ruslan, we could talk a lot more about that. If, in this call, if we have time, and if not, hopefully in another call, I would be more than open and eager to hear your feedback and criticism from those calls and respond to
Yeah,
them.
we're gonna get you squared away on Jesus, Jake. I promise.
Okay, okay, all right, maybe, yeah, square, yeah. No, I'm trying to make a joke, but I don't want to say anything. You know. This anyway. Okay, so yeah, so we'll get me squared away. I'm sure you have a lot of feedback, a lot of criticism for me, which some of it I would probably push back and say, hey, no, this is what I meant. And some of
Sure.
it I would say, hey, you're right, that's good criticism, and I could do that better. But that's a longer conversation, and but I'd be excited to have it if we want to do that at some point. So, Ruslan, you have a pretty amazing story from what little I've heard and seen. So, Ruslan, for those who don't know, Ruslan is a Christian YouTuber, a hip hop artist. I've heard a couple of your songs; they're pretty awesome, and you're an entrepreneur. So, Ruslan, you are a refugee. You're from Baku. Sorry, correct me about the pronunciation.
Yep.
Back, what? How do I say it?
It's Ruslan and it's Azerbaijan Baku.
Okay. Azer- Well, the name I got right, right?
Okay, you could just say Baku. You could just say
Baku.
Baku.
Okay. And you moved to the U.S. as a child,
Yes.
And you have this incredibly successful YouTube channel. You've got over 600,000 followers, and the channel has become very popular for your commentary, usually centering around faith, lifestyle, and music. So when, how, and why did you move to the U.S.?
So I'm ethnically Armenian.
Hmm.
Armenia is this little country in between Turkey and Azerbaijan. Their statement is kind of like uh, two states, one nation, very similar, right? And Armenians have always had a deep presence in Azerbaijan and as well as Turkey. That's where like the 1915 genocide, Armenian genocide happened, right? With the conflict in Turkey. Long story short, have been in Azerbaijan forever, and there were some Arzis that were in Armenia, and issues and back and forth, and people getting displaced. Long story short, the pogroms of Baku happened in the late 80s, and this is still under the Soviet Union, and they wanted to expel all the Armenians out of Baku because of there being murmurings and rumors of Arzis getting expelled and displaced from Armenia. So there's this ethnic thing, and these folks fighting for thousands of years, probably hundreds of years, maybe not thousands of years. And so that then affected all the Armenians in Azerbaijan to get displaced. This is also under Soviet Union, and so we ended up applying for status as refugees, and we applied it in Australia, Israel, and the very last place we applied for was America, and America was the place we ended up going to, and so we came to San Diego.
Can I
That was
can I
like
can I can I can I jump in? Can I jump in?
whenever you want.
I don't want to
Yep.
interrupt you, but I want to pause, or I want to stop there and just try to understand even more of that story. So, what was life like for you when you were living
Yeah.
back there?
Yeah. So, I was fairly young, but I do remember things like food rations under communism. Like I remember lining up to get whatever our earmarked amount of food was. I remember water rations. I remember there being a tub of water that we were allowed to use to bathe and stuff for like a couple days or a week maybe. I remember the city. Baku is a gorgeous city, and it's a huge like destination hub right now. So I remember just being in a really nice area that didn't snow a lot, but a lot of people lived in apartments. I remember my mom didn't in the Soviet Union. You don't really have like a aspirational self-actualization of career. Like my mom was like a phone receptionist when people would call and she'd connect the calls, right? And so my dad worked as like a service dude and had to travel back and forth to Moscow because of the tension that was brewing in the late 80s. And he was also very entrepreneurial. So I remember him bringing back VCRs and like basically contraband that wasn't allowed in under the Soviet Union. He would get movies back and VCRs and cassettes and stuff that they weren't allowed to have in the Soviet Union.
Wow. So life was not that easy. It sounds like there were the food rations, and
I mean, yeah,
were you
it's all relative,
yeah.
like we had food and shelter,
Okay.
it wasn't
Yeah.
America. Like everyone dreamed of going to America, even though we were under the Soviet Union, we still looked up to America for
Mhm.
sure. It was like, wow, that's look at the culture, look at the art. My access to American culture at that point was like Michael Jackson and like American Ninja. Like that's all
Mhm.
that was all I knew. And just that alone, folks were definitely pumped to be placed in America.
And what language did they speak there?
So my dad speaks Armenian
Mhm.
and Russian. My mother speaks Russian. She was the first one to learn English, and then I primarily grew up speaking Russian. I didn't get taught Armenian, unfortunately, and that's something I actually want to go back to as an adult, is to hopefully learn Armenian.
Armenian. So you speak English, you speak
Armenian is my
Armenian.
first language. Yeah.
Wow. And how old were you when you moved to the States?
I was 6, so 91. I was 6, so I'll be 40 this year, so I'm
Wow. You
39.
don't look 40.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. So you were 6. You moved to the States. Tell me about that. Where you guys moved, what life was like, and I eventually want to build towards how you got to where you are today. I'm very curious how it's not easy always moving from another country, and you start off from not a lot, right? You didn't have connections here. The language was different, and somehow and you came here as a 6-year-old, and you've built up your brand and your success to where it is today. So walk me through that journey.
Yeah, so I actually remember very vividly my first day in America. I remember we went to a store that I thought at the time was a toy store. Like I remember getting off the plane and going to what I thought was so lit up and beautiful and colorful and all these different things. And I remember thinking like, oh, how nice! Like my parents, we got to get me acclimated. They take me to a toy store first because I didn't take any of my toys from over, right? Like we had limited stuff in terms of what we could take. And then upon going in, I discovered like, oh, this isn't a toy store. Like this is a Lucky's grocery store. And there's a Lucky's off of El Cajon and like 30th Street or something like that, right off the where the 805 is in San Diego, City Heights area. And so like the just the way a grocery store looked to me, oh, like this has to be a toy store for kids, just how colorful it was and how beautiful the colors and the textures were. And I was like, because I'd never seen anything like that back in Baku. Like we didn't have stuff like grocery stores that had color, right? Like it was food rations. So I remember that, and I remember just getting acclimated into American culture. My neighbor, my first American friend was named Steven Jackson. His mom managed our little 8-unit apartment complex. Super, super cool guy. I still stay in touch with him till this day. I remember a couple months later, my mom and my father splitting. Their relationship was already on the rocks, and America was going to be like, we're starting a clean take in terms of our marriage. And she was still communicating with her boyfriend back in Baku. So then my dad left. My dad leaving was a huge impact on me. I remember a couple months after, around the time he left, my mom's dad died. And so that was like a big deal back there. So that took a number on her. So she like loses her husband and she loses her dad. And she's kind of coming to the grips of like, I'm probably never going to see my parents again. So she goes down this like pretty dark spiral of alcohol. I don't get to see my father much. She starts having pretty toxic dudes that come around. We were the first Armenian family here, more or less, from the refugees that came over, and then the Armenian diaspora started growing more and more. There started becoming more and more folks that came to like this City Heights, Normal Heights area of San Diego. So then a lot of these folks, unfortunately, like the Soviet Union was different. That culture was hard, and then these folks they make it out of communism. And so you got a lot of over celebrating, a lot of self medicating, not dealing with your issues. So a lot of alcoholism. I remember calls of someone's a husband just died in a drunk driving accident, and my mom's getting a call and she's going and sitting with the lady. We got then acclimated to like the cultural hub, the community hub of the community was the Armenian Apostolic Church. This is kind of in the Oriental stream of the church. And so that was like my first kind of like exposure to the idea of God. Like I had heard of God, but I never like saw him as a personal God. And then like you go to like an Armenian Apostolic Church, which now as an adult is like, it's beautiful. Like the buildings are beautiful, the art is beautiful. But back then it was kind of spooky and dark and like incense and, it was pretty intense. And so, yeah, so that's kind of like, I'm kind of getting exposed to American culture. I'm getting more connected to my ethnic Armenian culture as like Armenia being the first Christian nation and a lot of transitions.
Wow. How old were you when your dad left?
About 6 or 7. I think it was a couple months after we came out. So we came out in May 91. My birthday, I just turned 6 in December. So maybe 91, 90, beginning of 92 is when he left. Probably 91. It was fairly early because I remember my dad got a job as a cook. And so he kind of had some income coming in, and he had a car. And so he took the car, took his job, took his income, and, figured it out.
That sounds tough. And it sounds like you had life wasn't so easy back in Baku, and that's why you came to the States. But then when you got to the States, it wasn't a cakewalk either. Just the opposite. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think even when you mention that's interesting. Like even in Baku, at least we had my mom's parents around, so at least she had some emotional stability. Whereas here, there was no family. Like it was just me and my mom, and then like just friends and acquaintances. And so yeah, for her, it was probably way harder for her than it was for me in hindsight, and that's probably why she kind of went down a pretty self-destructive path in terms of the dudes she started dating and the alcoholism taking over and the depression and she was in a rut for a long time, man. My mom, we were on welfare for about 5 years. My dad moved on, brought his girlfriend out, got remarried, started a family, and my mom made it difficult for him to come around, so I didn't get to see him a whole lot. And so yeah, it was a pretty difficult time.
of time for you. And I'm sorry to. I mean,
No, you're good.
sounds well. It sounds hard. So you were six-ish. Your dad left. This is when your mom was in a hard space, and then so then walk me through the timeline. When did so then you're six, seven, eight, nine. Did life change at all from when you were 10 into your teenage years? What was high school
Yeah.
like? And
Yeah, a lot of
yeah.
changes. I'll try to give you like a condensed version. Long
Yeah.
story short,
And by the way, I'm interested to hear the story in full. I know that we have limited time, but please, take as much time as you're willing to tell your story.
sure. Yeah. So as I'm getting acclimated to the Armenian Apostolic Church, I become an altar boy. There's some older altar boys that end up sexually assaulting me. They're like early teens. I'm like 7, 8 at this point. That kind of messes me up. The way the community reacted to it messed me up because somehow it was like responsibility shifting to make me look like the aggressor in the situation, and I was like a child, right? And these boys were teenagers, so that like jacked me up. And then my mom didn't like that the church remarried my dad. So then she was mad at the church. And so by the time I'm like going into fourth, fifth grade, I'm a pretty rough kid. Like I'm like trying to like sell weed, and I like smoke weed already at this point. I've consumed a lot of porn. Um, I was uh, breaking into houses. I was really off a deep end. And around the same time, my mom kind of starts getting her footing. She finally gets like a job, but the issue is now she's working nights, which means leaves me unsupervised. So now I just get into a lot of trouble as a kid. I got arrested at age 11, lost my virginity around that same time, age 11. Um, and yeah, man, I was very hostile to the idea of there being a God, because why would God allow all these terrible things to happen to me? And if he exists, he clearly doesn't care about me. That's how I viewed things. And so all of that was pretty rough. And then thankfully my mom saw the writing on the wall, especially when I got arrested, and she relocated us to where I'm at now, which is North County, San Diego. I'm in Vista, California, which is like just south of Orange County, basically, right? There's Camp Pendleton that separates us in Orange County. And this was very different. This is like where I'm at is like it's not city, it's more suburban. It's more like the neighborhood I'm in doesn't have a sidewalk. Like it's a lot of like green and houses, and it's not what the city was for me. And that gave me a fresh start. That gave me the ability to focus on basketball, and I remember my GPA at the end of my seventh grade year. I thought I was gonna have to redo seventh grade. Was like 1.2 or something crazy, like really bad grades. And then somehow they just let me go into the eighth grade when I moved out here. And my GPA at the end of eighth grade was a 3.8. So I went from literally like a complete failure as a student to like turning everything around. And so that environment change was huge for me, man. That shift in the environment. And around the same time, I really got into music. So I started dabbling in music. I thought I was going to go to the NBA,
How old
and
were
then
you at this point? How old are you at this point when your GPA turned around?
eighth grade, the end of my eighth grade year.
Got
So
it.
what is
13
that?
or something, 12,
Yeah,
13.
13, 14. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So everything turns around. I go into high school, and I plan is to go into the NBA. And then,
Were you pretty
you know,
good? Were you pretty good at
I
basketball?
was I was not. I was
Huh.
delusional. I was I was a tall kid most of middle school, and then when I got into high school, I was no longer the tallest kid in my class. Right, like I was kind of like maybe a little bit above average. And I also only my mom's only child, so didn't do great interpersonally, relationally, and a lot of sports is how you get along with the coach, how do you get along with the other players, the camaraderie you build. And so I worked really hard, but yeah, and then I was Armenian, and like there's never been an Armenian that's made it to the NBA, and my mom's boyfriend sat me down and had a conversation with me about genetics and how, hey man, like this isn't really in the cards. So I got cut for my sophomore year of my JV team. Everyone's like, Michael Jordan got cut from his sophomore year. No, Michael Jordan got cut from his varsity team. He didn't get cut from the JV team. And that was like the death of the basketball dream. And then I kind of pivoted over to music, started taking music seriously. We did a couple like Battle of the Bands as a rap group, won a couple of those talent shows. And so I just kind of pursued that for a while, man. And music eventually turned into a full-time career where I was able to travel the country doing a combination of performing at colleges, which paid really well, and then performing at some churches. We were like kind of too edgy for churches as a Christian hip hop group. And that's kind of what I did initially full time. In the same around the same time, like I'm getting married, I'm a newlywed, I'm starting a family, I'm
Wait, and
involved in
I need
like
to back up.
church.
I'm cutting in when I feel like I want to get more,
No, you're good.
but
You're good.
I
Go
really
ahead.
hate interrupting you.
You're good.
When did you become religious?
When did I become? That's a great question. I had people kind of give me these like prophetic words when I was in the dark in that darkness of like sixth and seventh grade.
Hmm.
And what happened is, remember I told you about my mom's friend, my first American friend, Stephen Jackson. His mom was Cherie. She started like she got saved in jail. She got caught trying to transport cocaine, and she ends up getting like radically converted. Our entire complex gets becomes Christian, really serious about their faith. Yet there was always, especially in the black church stream of Christianity, there's a good balance of grace and truth. They'll tell you the truth about you, but they'll embrace you and they'll still love you and they'll tell you, God's got you. Like you may not get it now, and so then it turned into these like very interesting like prophetic things, like God's going to use you. You're going to speak to millions of people one day, like these sorts of things, which I was like, no, like stop it. Like God, first of all, God doesn't exist. If he does, he definitely doesn't like me. And if he exists, I don't want anything to do with him. And those seeds and that the gospel being told to me early on, eventually I met a girl in high school and it was the end of my freshman year. I had won a talent show at Bringle Terrace Park, and the only way I could see her over the summer, so this is like as school is ending, was if I went to church with her and her family. And at this point, I kind of went from like Tupac took me from like atheist to deist because he talked about God in a positive light. I listened to a lot of Tupac. And then DMX took me from like deist to like theist. Like maybe there is a God out there because of how he'll do a whole album about murdering people and just like the most awful, vile things. And then like there'll be a song about Jesus. And I'll be like, what is this Jesus thing, right?
So
So by the
DMX
time
DMX brought you to religion, man.
but low key, he got me open to it. He softened me
Yeah.
up. He warmed me up. So I meet a girl. Only way I could see her during the summers if I go to church with her and her family. And I said, why not? So I started kind of going to church casually, and the message just kind of it just resonated. It culminated, and then, dude, I went on a 2-year journey of me and her being on and off again. I dated a Jehovah's Witness girl. This is around the time of 9/11, so I had Muslim friends, I had Mormon friends, and I really went down as a freshman. Well, technically, this is now the beginning of my sophomore year of just wrestling with God and religion and faith for about 2 years, reading books and talking to people. And I would say fully surrendered my life to the Lord probably the end of my junior year. That's when I was like, okay, I'm not, Jesus is who he says he is. I need to live his ways because they're good and they're in my best interest. And I'm not going to do this like 1 foot in, 1 foot out thing anymore. And so that was the end of my junior year. So it was, overall, man, this is like, it started probably sixth, seventh grade, didn't fully commit until like the end of my junior year of high school.
Got it. Amazing. Thanks for walking me through that. And then back to your story. So you're in high school. Your basketball dreams have been destroyed. How? So let's start from high school. I'm still listening and trying to hear for when you were able to kind of get on this rise to success that you've now achieved. And so, what was
Yeah.
life like
So
in high school, and then after that?
high school was fun, man. Freshman and sophomore year, I was able to kind of hang out with the older kids because I played basketball and then then I rapped, and so I kind of got to hang out with guys that were older. And then towards the end, sophomore year, junior year, was hard because that was the year I was really trying to figure out my faith. And then all along, I'm doing music. I'm senior year, I'm finally committed to Jesus. So I'm like leading Bible studies and trying to figure this thing out. And thankfully, man, we had some really cool like media stuff at my high school. So like I remember learning Premiere in junior year. I remember being 12th grade year on my school broadcast thing where there would be like announcements, and there would be an actual video that got live streamed to the entire campus. And so I remember that being a part of that team. So I'm early on learning media. I'm learning music production. And then I got my own computer, so I start producing music. And I kind of used this idea of talent stacking. I think Scott Adams may have coined it, where I just built on top of other skills. So like I learned to use a computer, then I learned to record myself, then I learned to make my own beats, then I learned to mix my own music, and I practiced on other people. And then as the computers got fast enough, then I started incorporating video. I already kind of knew Premiere. I understood the workflow. And so I kind of kept building on it. And then long story short, as music is happening, I'm starting to now direct and shoot all my own music videos. And this is early. This is like 2010, 2009, 2010, 2011, very early on, before music video, before YouTube was really a thing. We're making our own music videos, and some of them are still up. And I then took a job at my church doing all the media and the broadcast. So then I understood live streaming and broadcasting, and again that like chain of links of different skills stacking on top of each other. 2015, I quit my job. I do music full time, and I did a vlog called My Days of Full Time Rapper. I kind of inspired by Casey Neistat's vlogs back then. I'm not sure if you kept up. Huge vlog era. And then I did that. I did music professionally from 2015 to 2020. And then around 2020, no, actually earlier than that, around 2018, our operator, Zach, who's still with me till this day, got a thing called a cam link, which you can connect a DSLR, and then you can connect it right into your computer. And so Zach, like, hey, man, we should try this. And so we did like our first live stream. It's still on the Bless God Studios channel. I want to say it's like 2018, 2019-ish, maybe earlier. And I started kind of experimenting with live streaming. And then basically, man, I just kind of combined all the things I'd been doing. Had a loose interest for music. I used to do music reviews. I kind of pivoted from that. But it got me the start of having like a loyal community on Patreon that like supported me because they wanted my feedback on their music because I was professionally doing music. Then I started talking about my faith more, 2019, 2020-ish. And then I started like really combining my faith background in the sense of like I had always led small groups and Bible studies, and how Bible studies usually would go if something crazy happened in the news, people would come in and want to talk about it first. They would be anxious about it. And so we're trying to kind of connect it to scripture. So I kind of like tried that format on YouTube of like, hey, this is what's trending right now. It's 2020. It's the election cycle. It's going, everything's going crazy. Let me just give my thoughts on like some of the foolishness I'm seeing, some of the craziness I'm seeing, and try to tie it into scripture. And that I had actually done that. If we're talking about hours, like the 10,000 hour rule, I had done that more than anything else. I had actually done that more than music. I had done that more because just the consistency of always being in some sort of small group and kind of always being thrust into being the leader of it. And so I tried that on YouTube, man. And the music review stuff was okay. I would do like marketing. I was like the Christian Gary V, if you will. Like that didn't really work. And I tried a couple different things. But the combination of my faith and being more overt about my faith and tying that into whatever was happening in society, that just kind of sparked it, man. And then I also stacked it with interviews. I would all of 2019, I would just interview people. 2020, I did a remote just like this. And the combination of all those things just the perfect storm hit. And so by the end of 2020, my music income was replaced by my YouTube income. And my Patreon grew. And so that's when I brought in Zach, same guy who introduced me to live streaming. He did all my music videos from like 2017,
He was on
2018.
you when you did the review of my Pageau
That's right.
thing.
Yeah.
Zach
Yep.
Sparazzo or something. Yeah.
Zach Sparazzo. So he's been with me. Man, he's been with me since he was in high school. I met him like the week he was graduating high school. And so thankfully, the moment I could actually pay him a livable salary, I did. And he had built his own media company at the time. And so he came over. And yeah, man, we just kind of been hitting it pretty hard. Now there's 4 of us full time. We have a couple contractors that are remote. My wife does the books. We got CPAs, and it's like a real thing now.
Yeah, very real thing. It's incredible. And congratulations on the success. Sounds like
Thanks, man.
you've found your niche, because you found something that works for you and your audience. And it sounds like it's been a transition. It was music, and then you moved towards Christianity, and you've really tapped into something big.
We'll see. We'll see how big it is.
Yeah. Seems like it's pretty big already,
I mean, big is relative.
Yeah.
That's the thing about, I guess, reaching any milestone is there's always another milestone. And so big is relative, I don't know how big the Christian niche is. Like if you're looking at the biggest channels that are overtly Christian, you're talking about a couple million subscribers.
Pretty good, though. It's not bad.
Yeah, that's good. And so it's like, but that's to say that all of those people want to hear from a guy like me, and someone that has my story, and someone that has my personality, and so it's like big is relative. But yeah, man, by the grace of God, like it's been really good. And now I just finished my first book, so I just submitted the rough draft for my first book. I'm doing it with Penguin Random House, Waterbrooks. And we're doing our first 3-day summit in January in Orange County, 3-day conference. I've been able to build like merch that I've always envisioned that I wanted to do. So we're doing like our first like custom cut and sew Japanese salvage denim jacket. And I've always been into like, nice denim. And so anyway, so I'm able to do stuff that I've kind of always dreamed about, and having an audience and the resources now to try and do some pretty awesome stuff.
That's great. And we'll see where it goes. Hopefully, this is just the beginning.
Hopefully.
Can I ask a question about your faith and tell me as much or as little as you're comfortable with, but you mentioned this horrific experience that you had as a child, and then years and years after that, faith in Christianity is a meaningful part of your life. Um, was it hard to reconcile the horrific thing that happened to you, or have you been able to see what I'm asking? Like, my question is, did that in any way deter you from faith, or how are you able to move past that and not have that interfere at all?
Yeah, it definitely deterred me from faith early on, man. I mean,
Mm,
I think the problem of evil is something that a lot of people deal with in terms of like an abstract idea. What about starving children in this part of the world, right? But when the problem of evil is like at your front door and does a number on you and then kind of changes the potential trajectory of your life, like I think it definitely did a number on me, and it definitely made me again, it made me an atheist. Like I was like, I'm an atheist. I don't believe there is a God, and if there is a God, then I don't want anything to do with him. That was my posture. And I think what happened was that as I got older, I discovered that those scars, that the awful things that happened to me ultimately contributed to who I was and who I was becoming. And so even though there was bad things, those bad the suffering and the struggle ended up contributing to where my life was going and the beauty of it. And then like hearing the passion story, and you go, man, like injustice happens, evil happens, and you don't have to go further than the cross to see a man we believe is pure, good, wholesome, without sin, facing the greatest injustice and the most amount of suffering, betrayed by a friend, right? By the same people that were following him, now yelling, crucify him. And you look at that and you go, oh man, so there is purpose to this. There is order to this. And if I can resonate with that story, then I could resonate with the other side of that story, which is ultimately the resurrection and the ascension of Jesus, right? That on the other side of suffering and betrayal and shame, that there's a beauty to it.
yeah. Wow. That's powerful, and that's really great that you've been able to not move past, but to live your best life and a life in accordance with your faith in spite of these hardships that you've had to endure. And by the way, that is one thing that I was trying to say that might have gotten lost in the conversation with Jonathan Pageau, is that if there's one point I want to make very clear to listeners on these shows, is that I truly understand and appreciate the value of practicing religion, and I can see that the meaning and the peace it can bring to people. So that's great that you were able to find that. How'd you meet your wife?
So me and my wife actually went to the same high school. We were friendly in high school. When I was doing some Bible studies, I remember a couple of times I'd like give her a ride to them. It'd be me, my buddy Big Mike, and my wife. Big Mike and my wife kind of live near each other,
Big
and so
Mike. You still call him Big Mike?
I still call him Big Mike. Big Mike's passed on. That was
Oh,
another pretty crazy
Jesus
thing that
Christ! You've
happened.
had a hard life, man.
When I was 19, my best friend died of pneumonia. He was a heavy dude, a pretty big guy, and yeah, man, he got pneumonia, and like we thought he was gonna be fine, and we thought God would heal him, and then like a month later, he was in not within a month he passed away, and I met my wife about a year before that, and so I would give her rides to church, just like Bible study thing I was doing. Mike would be with us, and then around the same time that Big Mike passed, which is the end of May, 2004, is a month after that. Me and my wife started dating, and so it was like this. It's interesting. It's like losing a friend and then gaining a
You
friend.
were 19.
I was 19. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
so
I was
you've been with
19.
her since 19.
Yeah, I've been with her since 19. Yeah, she was 17 when we started dating, because she kind of like, her birthday's in September. So, like if your birthday's in September or August, sometimes you can graduate at 17. So she graduated at 17. I graduated at 18, but I was technically, I guess, a year and a half older, almost 2 years older than her. And so, yeah, we start dating. I'm 19, she's 17. We date for 4 years on our 4 year wedding anniversary. Excuse a 4 year dating anniversary. We get married. And so tomorrow will be our 16-year wedding anniversary, 20 years together. So we're at that place where we've been together longer than we've been apart, meaning that we've been together 20 years. I'm 39, right? And she's, what is she? She's 37 now. Yeah.
And you've got two kids.
Two kids. Levi's 9. Super fun being a dad, man. He's great. We went to a movie last night, just me and him. And then Zoe is 3. Zoe's our COVID baby. We had her during COVID, which is pretty crazy, man. 2001 she was born. Yeah, man.
What are your recommendations for a new dad? I have a 4-month-old son.
Whew, man. The first one was scary. I'll be honest with you, man. I was in a transition with my career. I knew that like I couldn't. I knew that I wanted to quit my job and do music full time, but I knew that I wasn't all the way there, and so I kind of had to figure that out, and that was very scary economically for us. And I think the transition of just like watching my wife become a mother was interesting in a good way. I mean, the best advice I could give is to be to not be too hard on yourself and know that like no one like everything else in life you have to go through some sort of process or system for to get certified in something, right? You want a driver's license, you need a degree, you want to go sell something. Usually there's some kind of training that comes along. And the two things that are I think the most important, which is who you marry and have kids, right? Those two things, people assume they're just going to figure them out naturally. And my advice would be, don't be too hard on yourself because it's very difficult to figure it out naturally. And try to find some sort of systems and guardrails in terms of how you're going to lead your marriage and how you're going to lead your family. Books, mentors, stuff like that. And the more you get, you expose yourself to other ideas of how family can be done, how being a dad can work, how being a husband can work. The more you allow systems and mentors and philosophies, the easier it becomes. Sometimes just having someone that's a season ahead of you. I've been always fortunate because of church, man, to just have good men that were like, when I was a newlywed, they had been married for 5 years and they had their first kid. And when I had my first kid, their kids were 10 to 15 years old, And now like I have a 9-year-old, he's going to become a teenager soon. My pastor, his son just graduated high school. So I've always had amazing men in my life that like a season ahead that can at least make me remind me that like I'm not alone and like other people have gone through this. It's going to be okay. And provide practical wisdom in terms of how to raise a boy that's about to go through puberty and what are the parameters and like are phones ever a good idea? How do you deal with the internet, right? And like working through all of that practically. And much of that, as much as I want to say there's systems and there's best practices, a lot of that is also caught and not taught.
Caught and not taught, you said?
Caught and not taught. Yeah, like you catch it. Like I catch it from my pastor at my old church who, he has awesome daughters who all love Jesus and got married and are thriving. They got married young. They have babies and they're killing it. They're crushing it, right? Watching him with his kids and watching how he's led his family and watching that he didn't allow his girls to have smartphones until they were 16, 17. They couldn't even be on social media until they were 18. And the only way they would be on social media is on his phone. So there would be high amounts of supervision. And they hated it at the time. But now they're all young women in their early 20s who love God and have great husbands and families and are stable and they're flourishing. He didn't sit me down and give me the philosophy around smartphones. Like it's caught. I'm watching him walk through it in real time. I'm talking to his kids. I'm seeing how they don't like it. And then now that they're married and they're in their early 20s, they love him for it, right? That's what I mean by caught and not taught.
You're experiencing it.
Yes.
It's like
I'm doing life with someone that's going through it. Yeah.
like you're witnessing it. You're a part of it. It's not just someone sitting you down and say, "Hey, Ruslan, this is what you got to do." It's you're able to observe it. And I imagine, like you're saying, it's just a more effective way to internalize it. Well, that makes sense. So having structures in place, having mentors. When did you and your wife get married? How old were you?
I was 23. She was 21.
Wow. Because I was going to say, not only, like, I feel like marriage is hard enough as it is, and all the challenges people deal with. Tell me if you disagree, but I imagine that getting being with someone at 20, like if I was married at 23, it would have been a disaster. Who I was at 23, it wouldn't have worked out. I'll tell you that. And if it did work out, it would have been with tremendous struggle. So, but you made it work.
I
And
mean, it was a struggle. It
yeah,
was a struggle. Everything in life worth having is a struggle, man. Going to the gym is a struggle.
yeah,
Like flourishing financially is a struggle. Having a healthy family and a stable marriage and godly kids is a struggle. I think all of it is a struggle. And so I I don't regret getting married young at all. I think it brought us together. We had our foundations figured out. We knew what we wanted. We knew who we were. We knew what we believed. We knew the trajectory for our lives. We knew those things. We sorted those things out. And so there was no need for me to wait another couple years and like what in case someone better came along, in case I needed to make more money. It didn't make any sense. So now in hindsight, like I wish someone did walk me through some of the more financial literacy aspects and how to balance my aspirations of a career with providing and earning the most amount to create a bit more stability early on. Like I wish those conversations were had, and people tried, but I was very like hard-headed, man, because I really was passionate about the music thing, and I thought like that was going to be the thing to set us up, and it got me to quit my job and start as an entrepreneur, but it wasn't the thing; it was the thing that led to the thing. So there were aspects that I think I could have done better early on for sure,
mhm,
but it's hard on the job training, man. It's difficult.
yeah. No, I mean,
It was a different time, not to cut you up. It wasn't like now I feel like there's more access to side hustles. There's more access to creating different revenue streams. There's more access to just even education has changed so much, man. I remember Outliers came out around the time I was a newlywed, the 10,000 hour rule, mastery, right? And then like recently Malcolm Gladwell went back and like reneged on that whole 10,000 hour rule. And he said, because of e-learning, you can become a chess master. That's the 10,000 hour rule is anchored on being a chess master and an expert musician. He went back and said, yeah, like now you can become a chess master in 2,500 hours. Online learning has completely cut the idea of what it takes to be an expert in anything. And that's just to be an expert. You could talent stack your way with a couple key abilities, and those require, there's a book called 20 hours. So you can learn almost anything and be proficient at it within 20 hours. And that just wasn't around in 2008. Like you couldn't, online learning wasn't as big. There wasn't as many opportunities. We didn't know social media would be as big as it was. Thankfully, I hinged my bets on the internet growing, and it worked out.
yeah, amazing. If we have 3 minutes, couple rapid fire questions. If you could give a piece of advice to yourself as a 20-year-old, because you're nearing 40. So if you could give yourself a piece of advice as a 20-year-old and as a 30-year-old, what would those pieces of advice be?
Are we saying just generalized advice? Or are we saying like, man,
To you.
now knowing now if I knew then what I know now type of
Yeah,
advice?
the latter. Yeah.
The latter, yeah, I would say go all in on the internet. Like you're onto something with that. Figure out as much as you can about video. Figure out as much as you can about storytelling. Figure out as much as you can about technology, and really go in on that. And don't be afraid to talk about your faith more. To document your journey and talk about your faith more. I mean, like man, in hindsight, like bro, I could have been earlier to vlogging. Had I known the things now, I could have been earlier on YouTube. I could have been earlier to so many different things. And then I would also say, don't be afraid to work and make more money. Like money's not bad. Because I come from the Soviet Union, bro. Like there was a lot of like subtle Marxist views that I had that I didn't know I had until I grew up and had to deprogram myself just from views of success and money that I think are really, people would say they're Christian, but they're not. It's Marxism influencing the church and influencing Western worldview.
Hmm. And what would you tell? My final question is, what advice would you give to someone much younger who is dealing with the struggles that you dealt with? What would you tell someone who's struggling how to persevere?
I would say community and proximity to healthy people and being connected to people that are where you'd like to go if you can be, which for me, man, the church was such a great vehicle to get connected with people of different socioeconomic backgrounds and people that were successful business people that like struggled in the same way I did in my marriage, that overcame those struggles. That was so huge. different ethnicities, right? Uh, like these things were huge. So I would say proximity and community around people was very impactful. And then I would say strength training for me was huge, to have healthy outlets to not relive some of the traumatic stuff. I, got sucked into porn. And once I incorporated healthy habits and healthy habit formation, like strength training was great for me and is great for me. And I think the last one would be, um, if you have trauma, like if you've gone through traumatic, there's an ACE test you can take to see how many things you experienced as a child. And if you've gone through these like traumatic events, divorce in your childhood, sexual assault, neglect, you could kind of see where you're at. And if you've gone through like, I gone through 7 out of 10. And if you're where I'm at, like I would say definitely consider therapy or some sort of like way to get to the root of your issues. Because a lot of times we're just dealing with the fruit. We're dealing with like the external outcomes, and we're not understanding why are we having these struggles. And until I grew up and like, like my late 20s, early 30s, I started then thinking about like, oh man, these like patterns in my life, and why did these things happen? Then I got to the root of them, and I realized, oh, it's like a lot of this. Not to say that stuff is an excuse for my childhood, but at least gave me a reason and a context to understand why I react in certain situations, and that then required therapy and work.
Wow. Thank you for sharing all that. And Ruslan, thank you so much for this time. This was amazing hearing your story, and I hope this is not the last conversation.
Yeah, man.
So
Let's do it again, brother. I appreciate you, Jake, and hopefully we can hang out in person at some point.
that'd be great. I'm not too far away. I'm like an hour and a
Yeah.
half up. And happy anniversary.
Thank you, man.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
you get back from, I know you're going on a trip. You said
Yeah.
pretty soon here.
So I'm going to Boston on Tuesday, Wednesday, like Tuesday red eye. And then I don't have a return flight. So I think that I'm gonna go for a month. So my sister's having a baby.
Congrats.
So it's like, and then my wife and I are gonna stay with my parents. And so aspirationally, like we want to stay a long time. We'll see.